For about a decade, so many of us tuned in every single week to watch Allison Mack as Chloe Sullivan on Smallville, right? She was the smart, quirky, super loyal best friend, kind of the tech genius heart of the whole group. Her character was, a moral compass. But here's the crazy part. While she was playing a hero's sidekick on TV, the actress herself was living a secret life, one that was spiraling into a shockingly dark reality, a reality that twisted loyalty into something terrifying and friendship into a hierarchy of absolute control. So let's get into this really complex and disturbing story.
And this right here really just lays it all out. It's the unbelievable split at the center of this whole thing. On one hand, you have the public face, the successful actress that everybody knew and loved. And on the other, the hidden truth, that she was a high-ranking leader in a secret group inside the NXIVM organization, a group that the government would later call a sex cult. And that really brings us to the big, haunting question we're going to explore. How does somebody so famous, so successful, get tangled up in and actually become a key player for such a dangerous and manipulative cult?
Now, what's truly chilling are Mack's own words right here. This is her remembering the moment a red-hot medical pen was being burned into her skin. And that physical reaction, the shaking, the shock, of course that's normal. What is not normal is the ability she's describing to just shut it off, to mentally disconnect from that insane level of pain and just focus on the task. It's a textbook example of dissociation, really, a survival mode where your mind basically checks out from reality to handle something totally overwhelming, and it's a state that these high control groups are masters at creating.
So let's kind of break down how this double life was even possible. It all started with an organization that, on the surface, looked like something completely different. And honestly, it's a classic cult move. Put on a respectable, even desirable face for the public. A legitimate front that hides all the darkness underneath.
This was the mask that NXIVM, spelled NXIVM, wore for the world. They weren't advertising with words like masters and slaves. Oh no. It was sold as a path to becoming a better you. Think of it like a multi-level marketing company, but for your own potential. We're talking high-end executive coaching, personal development seminars, workshops to help you break through your limits. It had this whole vibe of corporate legitimacy that was just incredibly tempting for successful, ambitious people, actors, entrepreneurs, wealthy heirs, anyone looking for that extra edge.
But behind that professional-looking mask, this was the horrifying reality. This was the initiation. It wasn't some self-help workshop. It was a ritual designed to break people. According to testimony from the women who went through it, they'd be called to a house, usually late at night, with absolutely no clue what was about to happen. They were told they were getting a small tattoo. But once they got there, they were told to get completely undressed, lie on a table, and then they were physically held down by other women they thought were their friends, their sisters in this group. And then, the smell of burning skin would just fill the air.
The sheer brutality of this it's just hard to wrap your head around. There was zero anesthetic, no numbing cream, absolutely nothing to dull the pain of a medical device literally burning a symbol into one of the most sensitive parts of the body for 20 minutes. They had to endure this for 20 minutes. It wasn't just about marking them, it was about breaking their will. And in a detail that really shows you the level of psychological conditioning, Mack herself said she got branded on her lunch break from teaching a NXIVM course, and then, body still shaking, she went right back to teaching the class. That is a terrifying level of mental control.
Okay, so how did things escalate to this point? Well, this brutal ceremony wasn't happening to every single NXIVM member who paid for a weekend workshop, not at all. This was for a very select few, an exclusive, secret, women-only group that was operating deep inside the bigger organization. This was the Inner Circle, and it had a name that pretty much spelled out its real purpose. It was called DOS, and that name, Dominus Obsequious Sororium, is a Latin phrase that was cooked up by NXIVM's leader, Keith Raniere. And, using Latin was a very deliberate move. It was an attempt to make the group sound all serious and ancient and intellectual. But the translation? It leaves nothing to the imagination. Master of the Obedient Female Companions. The entire point of this secret society was baked right into its name, the complete submission of women to one single master.
So the way this was structured is absolutely crucial. Think of it like a pyramid scheme, but for abuse. At the very, very top, you had Keith Raniere, the master. Below him, he had his own first-line slaves, who also acted as masters to the women they recruited. Allison Mack was one of these high-ranking masters, so her job was to go out and recruit her own slaves, who were then expected to eventually recruit their own. The structure was just diabolically smart. It basically outsourced the dirty work of recruitment, it kept Raniere insulated, and it forced victims to become abusers themselves just to move up.
Now let's go back to that brand for a second. The women were told the symbol was supposed to represent the 4 elements. But the truth, according to former members and investigators, was way more sinister. The symbol was actually designed to secretly include the initials of Keith Raniere, and, it was believed, Allison Mack. So these women were being permanently, and unknowingly, marked as the property of their leaders. Now, it is important to point out that today, Allison Mack disputes that her initials are in that design, but for years that was the understanding inside the group.
So at this point, you have to be wondering, why? Why would anyone stay? Why not just run after the first insane request? Well, the answer is that by the time those requests came, the door had already been locked behind them. You see, DOS wasn't just a group. It was a prison built out of blackmail, and it was designed to be impossible to escape.
The demands on the women in DOS went way beyond just doing chores. It was a slow, steady escalation of abuse. According to court records, this included being put on starvation diets, being sleep-deprived, and eventually being coerced into having sex with Raniere. They were forced to take nude photos and hand over the most personal, damaging secrets about themselves and their families. But why on earth would they hand over that kind of ammunition against themselves? The answer is this terrifyingly effective tool they called collateral. Before a woman was even told what DOS really was, before she was branded, she had to give up this collateral. And it couldn't just be something embarrassing, it had to be life-destroying. We're talking false confessions to crimes, signing over the deeds to family homes, sexually explicit photos, or secrets so dark they would tear their families apart. This was the cult's insurance policy. Once they had that information, they had total power. If you ever thought about leaving, they could threaten you with complete and total ruin.
Okay, so throughout all of this, the guy at the top of the pyramid, Keith Raniere, he kept his distance, at least publicly. He tried to act like this detached genius, this guru who had nothing to do with some secret women's club. But a secret audio recording would end up blowing that entire lie to pieces.
This was his official line. As journalists and eventually the FBI started getting closer, Raniere just flat out denied everything. He claimed DOS was some independent women's empowerment group that they had created all by themselves. He tried to paint himself as just a spectator, totally uninvolved in anything they did, especially the branding. In this quote, it just absolutely demolishes that claim. This is from a recording that Allison Mack secretly made during a conversation with Raniere, and in it, you can hear him literally coaching her on how to do the branding ceremony. He is micromanaging the psychological abuse, telling her how to frame an act of assault as some kind of gift. He wanted the women to beg for it, to see it as an honor. This recording was the smoking gun. It proved he wasn't just involved, he was the puppet master, pulling every single string. So, with the truth out and the leaders arrested, the justice system finally took over. And the prison sentences that were handed down to the mastermind and his top lieutenant, well, they show a huge contrast, and they force us to really grapple with these tangled questions about who's to blame within a system of total control.
Yeah, this chart really tells you a lot. Keith Raniere, convicted of racketeering, sex trafficking, forced labor, he got 120 years in federal prison. Basically a life sentence, to make sure he could never hurt anyone again. Then you have Allison Mack. She got just 3 years. That massive difference shows you that in the end, the justice system saw Raniere as the architect of the whole evil plan, while they saw Mack in a much more complicated way. Still as a criminal, for sure, but as someone whose own free will was seriously compromised. And on top of that massive prison sentence, Raniere's punishment also had a big financial part. He got hit with a $1.75 million fine, and then later, another order to pay back almost $3.5 million in restitution. So that's over $5 million that he was ordered to pay to his victims, a legal recognition of the incredible financial and emotional damage he caused for decades. As for Mack, her much lighter sentence had a lot to do with her choice to plead guilty to racketeering charges. And, crucially, she also provided a lot of help to the prosecutors who were building the case against Raniere. After serving 2 years of her 3-year sentence, she was released on parole. So she is out of prison now, trying to put a life back together that will forever be defined by her role in NXIVM. And all of this brings us back to the final, really haunting question this case leaves us with. Allison Mack was, without a doubt, a perpetrator. She recruited women into an abusive system, she commanded them, she enforced the rules. But she was also undeniably a victim. She was subjected to years of intense brainwashing by Keith Raniere, and she even went through the same branding that she inflicted on other women. So where do you draw the line? Can a person be both a victim and a villain in the very same story? It's a deeply uncomfortable question, and there's just no easy answer. It forces us to really think about the messy reality of coercion and consent and blame when someone is trapped in the shadow of a master manipulator.